Yes, sir. That's exactly right, Drowsy. Hi, kid. I want to say, I want to say good evening, but I don't know if that's like. I was thinking about this while I was starting stream. Like, what do people say when they're greeting each other, like at night? Because I feel like you could say, I feel like I want to say good evening, but that's not really accurate because it's nighttime now. But I also can't say good night because when people do that, it's usually like, I don't know, I guess they're saying it's like nighttime. You know, people only say that when people are like going to bed. I don't really know what to say. I think actually the best way that could possibly be done is maybe you would say like buenas noches, right? Because isn't that like, well, I know it's Spanish, but it's good night, but it doesn't, I feel like people say it not just at nighttime, you know? Does that make sense? I'm just trying to figure out my God, I need to, let me mute myself here. I guess I'll just say buenas noches. Buenas noches, everybody. Because we're not going to bed for a little bit, but it is a good night. Um, I was planning to start earlier, but um, well, I have work to do, and also the Wi-Fi was acting up. Like I wanted to start 2 hours at 2 to 3 hours ago, but the Wi-Fi was unacceptable. It's fine. Maybe it'll be a little shorter because I'll get a little sleepy, but from if my oops if my schedule that I posted on Twitter that I promised to follow is anything to go by, I I will be streaming tomorrow morning also. So that's interesting. Um yeah, tomorrow morning. So literally we're gonna end stream, go to bed and wake up and then start stream again, playing something. But tonight is just gonna be, yeah. Hi generic viewer. Maybe I wanna call you viewer. Or viewer? Yeah, hi viewer. Yeah, we're a little story time. I haven't read this in a while, but I really want it. Like I wanna read it. But I mean now's the chance. Crime and Punishment Part 2. I mean we only got 20 pages in. Yeah, early morning stream tomorrow because the morning is the only time when I have time tomorrow. Okay, so I have the book pulled up, Crime and Punishment. I'm on um page 23 of chapter 1. or not just chapter one of the whole book. If I don't imagine anyone is following along, that would be confusing. But just for my context, I write down. Also, I have my little blanket. I'm in my blanket, so you can tell how cozy we are right now. So when we started last time, months ago, what time it was? It's from 8 to 12, Eastern, which I think is your time zone, Drazi. Early morning. That's when I have time tomorrow. But so last time, which was at least like a month ago, we started this book. I don't remember the main character's name, but he was trying to, or he was at least thinking about robbing this old lady because he was super broke. And then he went to the bar where this super drunk guy was like talking for at least 10 pages about how he screwed over his family by like taking all the money and just like basically leaving, spending it on alcohol. And then he decided he was gonna go back to his family that he screwed over. And then I think the main character followed him for some reason. I don't know why, but we were at the point where just trying to make sure the music is not too loud. Does seem a little, especially this Minecraft music is crunking. I left out at the point where they arrived at his house and they were literally supposed to um okay. Where do I okay, Marmeladov is the guy who screwed over his family, and something Nikov is our main character. So Marmeladov did not enter the door, but dropped on his knees in the very doorway, pushing Raskolnikov, that's the main character, pushing Raskolnikov in front of him. The woman, seeing a stranger, stopped indifferently facing him, coming to herself for a moment and apparently wondering what he had come for. But evidently she decided that he was going into the next room, as he had to pass through hers to get there. Taking no further notice of him, she walked towards the outer door to close it, and uttered a sudden scream on seeing her husband on his knees in the doorway. "Ah!" she cried out in a frenzy. "He has come back! The criminal! The monster! And where's the money? What's in your pocket? Show me! And your clothes are all different. Where are your clothes? Where is the money? Speak!" And she fell to searching him. Marmeladov submissively and obediently held up both arms to facilitate the search. Not a farthing was there. Well, yeah, he's completely broke. Let's see. "Where's the money?" she cried. "Mercy on us, can he have drunk it all?" There were 12 silver rubles left in the chest, and in a fury she seized him by the hair and dragged him into the room. Marmeladov seconded her efforts by meekly crawling along on his knees. Oh, that's him talking. "And this is a consolation to me. This does not hurt me, but is a positive consolation, honored sir," he called out, shaken to and fro by his hair, and even once striking the ground with his forehead. The child asleep on the floor woke up and began to cry. The boy in the corner, losing all control, began trembling and screaming and rushed to his sister in violent terror, almost in a fit. The eldest girl was shaking like a leaf. He's drunk it all, the poor woman screamed in despair, and his clothes are gone, and they are hungry, hungry. And wringing her hands, she pointed to the children. Oh, accursed life! And you, are you not ashamed? She pounced all at once on Raskolnikov. From the tavern, have you been drinking with him? You've been drinking with him too. Go away! The young man was hastening away without uttering a word. The inner door was thrown wide open, and inquisitive faces were peering in at it. Coarse laughing faces with pipes and cigarettes and heads wearing caps thrust themselves in at the doorway. Further in could be seen figures in dressing gowns flung open, in costumes of unseemly scantiness, some of them with cards in their hands. They were particularly diverted when Marmeladov, dragged about by his hair, shouted that it was a consolation to him. They even began to come into the room. At last a sinister shrill outcry was heard. This came from Amelia Lipovitch herself, pushing her way amongst them and trying to restore order after her own fashion, and for her 100th time to frighten the poor woman by ordering her with a coarse abuse to clear out of the room the next day. As he went out, Raskolnikov had time to put his hand into his pocket, to snatch up the coppers he had received in exchange for his rouble back in the tavern, and lay them unnoticed on the window. Afterwards, on the stairs, he changed his mind and would have gone back. What a stupid thing I've done, he thought to himself. They have Sonia, and I want it myself. But reflecting that it would be impossible to take it back now, and that in any case he would not have taken it, he dismissed it with a wave of his, flipping the page, and went back to his lodging. Sonia wants pomatum. I don't know what that means. Sonia wants pomatum too, he said as he walked along the street, and he laughed malignantly. Such smartness costs money. And maybe Sonia herself will be bankrupt today, for there is always a risk hunting big game. Digging for gold, then they would all be without a crust tomorrow except for my money. Hurrah for Sonia! What a mine they've dug there. And they're making the most of it. Yes, they're making the most of it. They've wept over it and grown used to it. Man grows used to everything, the scoundrel. He sank into thought. And what if I am wrong? He cried suddenly after a moment's thought. What if man is not really a scoundrel? Man in general, I mean the whole race of mankind. Then all the rest is prejudice, simply artificial terrors, and there are no barriers, and it's all as it should be. That's the end of the chapter. Wait, that was chapter 2 apparently. I thought it was still chapter 1. We're on chapter 3 now. So he left behind some coins that he had to give to the family, and now he thinks he's like basically kind of like a savior to them. He woke up late next day after a broken sleep, but his sleep had not refreshed him. He waked up bilious, irritable, ill-tempered, and looked with hatred at his room. It was a tiny cupboard of a room about 6 paces in length. It had a poverty-stricken appearance, with its dusty yellow paper peeling off the walls, and it was so low-pitched that a man of more than average height was ill at ease in it and felt every moment that he would knock his head against the ceiling. The furniture was in keeping with the room. There were 3 old chairs, rather rickety, a painted table in a corner on which lay a few manuscripts and books. The dust that lay thick upon them showed that they had been long untouched. A big clumsy sofa occupied almost the whole of one wall and half the floor space of the room. It was once covered with chintz, but was now in rags and served Raskolnikov as a bed. Often he went to sleep on it, as he was, without undressing, without sheets, wrapped in his old student's overcoat, with his head on one little pillow under which he heaped up all the linen he had, clean and dirty, by way of a bolster. A little table stood in front of the sofa. It would have been difficult to sink to a lower ebb of disorder, but to Raskolnikov in his present state of mind, this was, flip the page, guessing positively agreeable. He had got completely away from everyone like a tortoise in his shell, and even the sight of the servant girl who had to wait upon him and look sometimes into his room made him writhe with nervous irritation. He was in the condition that overtakes some monomaniacs entirely concentrated upon one thing. His landlady had, for the last fortnight, given up sending him in meals, and he had not yet thought of expostulating with her, though he went without his dinner. Nastasia, the cook and only servant, was rather pleased at the lodger's mood, and had entirely given up sweeping and doing his room. Only once a week or so she would stray into his room with a broom. She waked him up that day. "Get up, why are you asleep?" she called to him. "It's past 9, I've brought you some tea. Will you have a cup? I should think you're fairly starving." Raskolnikov opened his eyes, started, and recognized Nastasia. "From the landlady, eh?" he asked, slowly, with a sickly face, sitting up on the sofa. "From the landlady, yes." She set before him her own cracked teapot full of weak and stale tea, and laid 2 yellow lumps of sugar by the side of it. "Here, Nastasia, take it, please." Oh, he said that. He said, fumbling in his pocket, for he had slept in his clothes, and taking out a handful of coppers. "Run and buy me a loaf, and get me a little sausage, the cheapest, at the pork butcher's." "The loaf I'll fetch you this very minute, but wouldn't you rather have some cabbage soup instead of sausage?" "It's capital soup, yesterday's. I saved it for you yesterday, but you came in late. It's fine soup." When the soup had been brought and he had begun upon it, Nastasia sat down beside him on the sofa and began chatting. She was a country peasant woman, and a very talkative one. "Praskovia Pavlovna means to complain to the police about you," he said. He scowled. "The police? What does she want?" "You don't pay her money, and you won't turn out of the room. That's what she wants, to be sure." "The devil, that's the last straw," he muttered, grinding his teeth. "No, that will not suit me just now. She's a fool." He added aloud, "I'll go and talk to her today." "Fool she is, and no mistake, just as I am. But why, if you are so clever, Do you lie here like a sack and have nothing to show for it? One time you used to go out, you say, to teach children. But why is it you do nothing now? I am doing, Raskolnikov began sullenly and reluctantly. What are you doing? Work? What sort of work? I am thinking, he answered seriously after a pause. Nastasia was overcome with a fit of laughter. She was given to laughter when anything amused her. She laughed inaudibly, quivering and shaking all over till she felt ill. Have you made much money by your thinking? She managed to articulate at least. One can't. Oh my God. My radiator is trying to talk to me. One can't go out to give lessons without boots, and I'm sick of it. Don't quarrel with your bread and butter. They pay so little for lessons. What's the use of a few coppers? He answered reluctantly, as though replying to his own thought. And you want to get a fortune all at once? He looked at her strangely. Yes, I want a fortune, he answered firmly after a brief pause. Don't be in such a hurry, you quite frighten me. Shall I get you the loaf or not? As you please. Ah, I forgot. A letter came for you yesterday when you were out. A letter? For me? From whom? I can't say. I gave 3 kopecks of my own to the postman for it. Will you pay me back? Bring it to me, for God's sakes, bring it, cried Raskolnikov, greatly excited. Good God! A minute later, the letter was brought to him. That was it, from his mother, from the province of R. It's blanked out. He turned pale when he took it. It was a long while since he had received a letter, but another feeling also suddenly stabbed his heart. Nastasia, leave me alone for goodness sake. Here are your 3 kopecks, but for goodness sake, make haste and go. The letter was quivering in his hand. He did not want to flip the page. He did not want to open it in her presence. He wanted to be left alone with this letter. When Nastasia had gone out, he lifted it quickly to his lips and kissed it. Then he gazed intently at the address, the small, sloping handwriting, so dear and familiar, the mother who had once taught him to read and write. He delayed. He seemed almost afraid of something. At last he opened it. It was a thick, heavy letter, weighing over 2 ounces. 2 large sheets of notepaper were covered with very small handwriting. My dear Rodya, wrote his mother, it's 2 months since I last had a talk with you by letter, which has distressed me and even kept me awake at night thinking. But I am sure you will not blame me for my inevitable silence. You know how I love you. You are all we have to look to, Donia and I. You are our all, our one hope, our one stay. What a grief it was to me when I heard that you had given up on the university some months ago, for want of means to keep yourself, and that you had lost your lessons and your other work. How could I help you out of my 120 roubles a day pension? The 15 roubles I sent you 4 months ago I borrowed, as you know, on security of my pension from Vasily Ivanovich, a merchant in this town. He is a kind-hearted man and was a friend of your father's too, but having given him the right to receive my pension, I had to wait till the debt was paid off, and that is only just done, so that I've been unable to send you anything all this time. But now, thank God, I believe I shall be able to send you something more, and in fact, we may congratulate ourselves on our good fortune now, of which I hasten to inform you. In the first place, would you have guessed, dear Roja, that your sister has been living with me for the last 6 weeks, and we shall not be separated in the future? Thank God, her sufferings are over. I will tell you everything in order, so that you may know just how everything has happened and all that we have hitherto concealed from you. When you wrote to me 2 months ago that you had heard that Doña had a great deal to put up in with the, oh my God, it's a big name, to put in with the Svid something's house, sorry, I can't say that. When you wrote that and asked me to tell you all about it, what could I write in answer to you? If I had written the whole truth to you, I dare say you would have thrown up everything and have come to us, even if you had to walk all the way, for I know your character and your feelings, and you would not let your sister be insulted. I was in despair myself, but what can I do? And besides, I did not know the whole truth myself then. What made it all so? What made it all so difficult was that Doña received 100 rubles in advance when she took the place as governess in their family, on condition of part of her salary being deducted every month, and so it was impossible to throw up the situation without repaying the debt. This sum, now I can explain it all to you, my precious Rodya, she took chiefly in order to send you 60 rubles, which you needed so terribly then, and which you received from us last year. We deceived you then, writing that this money came from Donia's savings, but that was not so, and now I tell you about it because, thank God, things have suddenly changed for the better, that you may know Donia loves you, and what a heart she has. At first, indeed, Mr. Svid treated her very rudely and used to make disrespectful and jeering remarks at the table. But I don't want to go into all those painful details so as not to worry you for nothing when it is now all over. In short, in spite of the kind and generous offer of Maria Petrovna, Mr. Svid's wife, and all the rest of the household, Donia had a very hard time, especially when Mr. Svid's relapsing into his old regimental habits was under the influence of Bacchus, so drinking. And how do you think it was all explained later on? Would you believe that the crazy fellow had conceived a passion for Donia from the beginning, but had concealed it under a show of rudeness and contempt? Possibly he was ashamed and horrified himself at his own flighty hopes, considering his years and his being the father of the family, and that made him angry with Donia. And possibly, too, he hoped by his rude and sneering behavior to hide the truth from others. But at last he lost all control and had the face to make Donia an open and shameful proposal, promising her all sorts of inducements and offering, besides, to throw up everything and take her to another state of his, or even abroad. You can imagine all she went through. To leave her situation at once was impossible, not only on account of the money debt, but also to spare the feelings of Maria Petrovna, whose suspicions would have been aroused, and then Donia would have been the cause of a rupture in the family. So this guy took the main character's sister as a mistress, and that's where they're getting the money from. And it would have meant a terrible scandal for Donia too. That would have been inevitable. There were various other reasons owing to which Donia could not hope to escape from that awful house for another 6 weeks. You know Donia, of course. You know how clever she is and what a strong will she has. Donia can endure a great deal, and even in the most difficult cases, she has the fortitude to maintain her firmness. Get a little sip of water. She did not even write to me about everything for fear of upsetting me, although we were constantly in communication. It all ended very unexpectedly. Maria Petrovna accidentally overheard her husband imploring Donia in her garden and putting quite a strong interpretation on the position, threw the blame upon her, believing her to be the cause of it all. An awful scene took place between them on the spot in the garden. Maria Petrovna went so far as to strike Donia, refused to hear anything, and was shouting at her for a whole hour, and then gave orders that Donia should be packed off at once to me in a plain peasant's cart, into which they flung all her things, her linen and her clothes, all pell-mell without folding it up and packing it. And a heavy shower of rain came too, and Donia, insulted and put to shame, had to drive with a peasant in an open cart, all 17 versts in the town. Only think now, what answer could I have sent to the letter I received from you 2 months ago, and what could I have written? I was in despair. I dared not write to you the truth because you would have been very unhappy, mortified and indignant, and yet what could you do? You could only perhaps ruin yourself, and besides, Donia would not allow it. And fill up my letter with trifles when my heart was so full of sorrow I could not. For a whole month the town was full of gossip about this scandal, and it came to such a pass that Donia and I dare not even go to church on account of the contemptuous looks, whispers, and even remarks made aloud about us. All our acquaintances avoided us. Nobody even bowed to us in the street, and I learned that some shopmen and clerks were intending to insult us in a shameful way, smearing the gates of our house with pitch, so that the landlord began to tell us we must leave. All this was set going by Maria Petrovna, who managed to slander Donia and throw dirt at her in every family. She knows everyone in the neighborhood, and that month she was continually coming into the town, as she is rather talkative and fond of gossiping about her family affairs, and particularly complaining to all and each of her husband, which is not at all right. So in a short time she had spread her story not only in the town, but over the whole surrounding district. It made me ill, but Donia bore it better than I did. And if only you could have seen how she endured it all and tried to comfort me and cheer me up. She is an angel. But by God's mercy, our sufferings were cut short. Mr. Sved returned to his senses and repented, and probably feeling the page. Come on, the page. And probably feeling sorry for Donia, he laid before Maria Petrovna a complete and unmistakable proof of Donia's innocence, in the form of a letter Donia had been forced to write and give to him before Maria Petrovna came upon them in the garden. This letter, which remained in Mr. Sved's hands after her departure, she had written to refuse personal explanations and secret interviews for which he was entreating her. In that letter, she reproached him with a great heat and indignation for the baseness of his behavior in regard to Maria Petrovna, reminding him that he was the father and head of a family, and telling him how infamous it was of him to torment and make unhappy a defenseless girl, unhappy enough already. Indeed, dear Rogia, the letter was so nobly and touchingly written that I sobbed when I read it to this day, and I cannot read it without tears. Moreover, the evidence of the servants too cleared Donia's reputation. They had seen and known a great deal more than Mr. Svids had himself supposed, as indeed is always the case with servants. Maria Petrovna was completely taken aback and again crushed, as she herself said to us, but she was completely convinced of Donia's innocence. The very next day, being Sunday, she went straight to the cathedral, knelt down, and prayed with tears to Our Lady to give her strength to bear this new trial and to do her duty. Then she came straight from the cathedral to us, told us the whole story, wept bitterly, and fully penitent, she embraced Donia and besought her to forgive her. Same morning, without any delay, she went round to all the houses in town, and everywhere, shedding tears, she asserted in the most flattering terms Donia's innocence and the nobility of her feelings and her behavior. What was more, she showed and read to every one the letter in Donia's own handwriting to Mr. Svid, and even allowed them to take copies of it, which I must say was superfluous. In this way, she was busy for several days in driving about the whole town, because some people had taken offense through precedence having been given to others. And therefore they had to take turns, so that in every house she was expected before she arrived, and everyone knew that on such and such a day Maria Petrovna would be reading the letter in such and such place, and people assembled for the reading of it. Even many who had heard it several times already, both in their own houses and in other people's. In my opinion, a very great deal of this was unnecessary, but that's Maria Petrovna's character. Anyway, she succeeded in completely re-establishing Donia's reputation, and the whole ignominy of this affair rested as an indelible disgrace upon her husband as the only person to blame, so that I really began to feel sorry for him. It was really treating the crazy fellow, too harshly. Donia was at once asked to give lessons in several families, but she refused. All of a sudden, everyone began to treat her with marked respect, and all this did much to bring about the event by which, one may say, our whole fortunes are now transformed. You must know, dear Rhodia, that Donia has a suitor, and that she has already consented to marry him. I hasten to tell you about this matter, and though it has been arranged without asking your counsel, I think you will not be aggrieved with me or your sister on that account, for you will see that we cannot wait to put off our decision till we heard from you. And you could not have judged all the facts without being on the spot. This was how it happened. He is already of the rank a counselor, Fyodor Petrovich Luzin, and is distantly related to Maria Petrovna, who has been very active in bringing the match about. It began with his expressing through her his desire to make our acquaintance. He was properly received, drank coffee with us, and the very next day he sent us a letter in which he very courteously made an offer and begged for a speedy and decisive answer. He is a very busy man, and it is in a great deal of hurry to get to Petersburg, so that every moment is precious to him. At first, of course, we were greatly surprised, as it had all happened so quickly and unexpectedly. We thought and talked it over the whole day. It's true that he is 45 years old, but he is of a fairly progressing appearance and might still be thought attractive by women, and he is altogether a very respectable and presentable man. Only he seems a little morose and somewhat conceited. But possibly that may only be the impression he makes at first sight. And beware, dear Roja, when he comes to Petersburg, and he shortly will do, beware of judging him too hastily and severely, as your way is, if there is anything you do not like in him at first sight. I give you this warning, although I feel sure that he will make a favorable impression upon you. Moreover, in order to understand any man, one must be deliberate and careful to avoid forming prejudices and mistaken ideas, which are very difficult to correct and get over afterwards. And Pyotr Petrovich, judging by... Oh my god. Was that so loud? The microphone just slipped off the desk and into my chest. So, Peter, the guy says mere indication is a thoroughly estimable man. At his first visit, indeed, he told us that he was a practical man, but still he shares, as he expressed it, many of the convictions of our most rising generation, and that he is an opponent of all prejudices. He said a good deal more, for he seems a little conceited and likes to be listened to. But this is scarcely a vice. I, of course, understood very little of it, but Donia explained to me that, though he is not a man of great education, he is clever and seems to be good-natured. You know your sister character. You know your sister's character, Roja. She is resolute, sensible, patient, and generous girl. But she has a passionate heart, and I know her well. Of course, there is no great love either on this side or on hers. But Donia is a clever girl and has the heart of an angel, and will make it her duty to make her husband happy, when his side will make her happiness his care. Of that we have no good reason to doubt, though it must be admitted the matter has been arranged in great haste. Besides, he is a man of great prudence, and he will see, to be sure of himself, that his own happiness will be the more secure, the happier Donia is with him. And as for some defects of character, for some habits, and even certain differences of opinion, which indeed are inevitable even in the happiest marriages, Donia has said that, as regards all that, she relies on herself, that there is nothing to be uneasy about, and that she is ready to put up with a great deal, if only their future relationship can be an honorable and straightforward one. He struck me, for instance, at first as rather abrupt, but that may well come from his being an outspoken man. And that is no doubt how it is. For instance, at his second visit, after he had received Donia's consent, in the course of conversation he declared that, before making Donia's acquaintance, he had made up his mind to marry a girl of good reputation, without dowry, and above all, one who had experienced poverty, because, as he explained, a man ought not to be indebted to his wife, but that it is better for a wife to look upon her husband as a benefactor. I must add that he expressed it more nicely and politely than I have, for I have forgotten his actual phrases and only remember the meaning. Besides, It was obviously not set of design, but slipped out in the heat of conversation, so that he tried afterwards to correct himself and smooth it over. But all the same, it did strike me as somewhat rude, and I said so afterwards to Donia. But Donia was vexed, and she answered that words are not deeds, and that, of course, it is perfectly true. Donia did not sleep all night before. She made up her mind, and thinking that I was asleep, she got out of bed and was walking up and down the room all night. At last she knelt down before the icon and prayed long and fervently, and in the morning she told me that she had decided. I have mentioned already that Peter Petrovich is just setting off for Petersburg, where he has a great deal of business, and he wants to open a legal bureau. He has been occupied for many years in conducting civil and commercial litigation, and only the other day he won an important case. He has to be in Petersburg because he has an important case before the Senate. So, Roji dear, he may be of the greatest use to you in every way indeed, and Donnie and I have agreed that from this very day you could definitely enter upon your career and might consider that your future is marked out and assured for you. Take a deep breath. I need some water, actually. I'm getting hoarse. Who knew reading was so difficult? Oh, if only this comes to pass. This would be such a benefit that we could only look upon it as a providential blessing. Donia is dreaming of nothing else. We have even ventured already to drop a few words on the subject to Peter Petrovich. He was cautious in his answer and said that, of course, as he could not get on without a secretary, it would be better to be paying a salary to a relation than to a stranger, if only the former were fitted to the duties. As though there was a doubt of your being fitted. But then he expressed doubts whether your studies at the university would leave you time for work at his office. The matter dropped for the time, but Donia is thinking of nothing else now. She has been in sort of a fever the last few days, and has already made a regular plan for your becoming, in the end, an associate and even a part of Peter Petrovich's legal business, which might well be, seeing that you are a student of law. I am in complete agreement with her, Rogia, and share all her plans and hopes, and think there is every probability of realizing them. And in spite of Peter Petrovich's evasiveness, very natural at present, since he does not know you, Donia is firmly persuaded that she will gain everything by her good influence over her future husband. This she is reckoning upon. Of course, we are careful not to talk of any of these more remote plans to Peter Petrovich, especially of your becoming his partner. He is a practical man and might take this very coldly. It might all seem to him simply a daydream. Nor has either Donia or I breathed a word to him of the great hopes we have of his helping us to pay for your university studies. We have not spoken of it in the first place because it will come to pass itself later on. And he will no doubt, without wasting words, offer to do it himself, as though he could refuse Donia that. The more readily, since you may by your own efforts become his right hand in the office, and receive his assistance not as charity, but as a salary earned by your own work. Donia wants to arrange it all like this, and I quite agree with her. and we had not spoken of our plans for another reason, that is, because I particularly wanted you to feel on an equal footing when you first met him. When Donia spoke to him with enthusiasm about you, he answered that one could never judge a man without seeing him close for oneself, and that he looked forward to forming his own opinion when he makes your acquaintance. Do you know, my precious Yodia, I think that perhaps for some reasons, nothing to do with Peter Petrovitch though, simply for my own personal, perhaps old womanish fancies, I should do better to go on a living by myself, apart, than with them after the wedding. I am convinced that you will be generous and delicate enough to invite me and to urge me to remain with my daughter for the future. And if he had said nothing about it hitherto, it has been taken for granted. But I shall refuse. I have noticed more than once in my life that husbands don't quite get on with their mothers-in-law, and I don't want to be the least bit in anyone's way. And for my own sake too, would rather be quite independent so long as I have the crust of bread of my own and such children as you and Donia. If possible, I would settle somewhere near you, for the most joyous piece of news, dear Roja, I have kept for the end of my letter. Know then, my dear boy, that we have perhaps be all together in a very short time, and may embrace one another again after a separation of almost 3 years. It is settled for certain that Donia and I are set off for Petersburg, exactly when I don't know, but very, very soon, possibly in a week. It all depends on Peter Petrovitch, who will let us know when he has had time to look round to him in Petersburg. To suit his own arrangements, he is anxious to have the ceremony as soon as possible, even before the fast of Our Lady, if it could be managed, or if that is too soon to be ready, immediately after. Oh, with what happiness I should press you to my heart. Donia is all excitement at the joyful thought of seeing you. She said one day in a joke that she would be ready to marry Peter Petrovitch for that alone. She is an angel. She is not writing anything to you now, and has only told me to write that she has so much to tell you, that she is not going to take up her pen now, for a few lines would tell you nothing, and it would only mean upsetting herself. She bids me send you her love and innumerable kisses. But although we shall be seeing so soon, perhaps I shall send you as much money as I can in a day or two. Now that everyone has heard that Donia is to marry Peter Petrovitch, my credit has suddenly improved, and I know that Afanasy Ivanovitch will trust me now even to 75 rubles on the security of my pension, so that perhaps I shall be able to send you 25 or even 30 rubles. I would send you more, but I am uneasy about our traveling expenses, for Peter Petrovitch has been so kind to undertake part of the expenses of our journey. That is to say, he has taken upon himself the conveyance of our bags and big trunk, which will be conveyed through some acquaintances of his. We must reckon upon some expense on our arrival in Petersburg, where we can't be left without a halfpenny, at least for the first few days. But we have calculated it all, Donia and I, to the last penny, and we see that the journey will not cost very much. There's only 90 versts from us, the railway, and we have come to an agreement with a driver we know, so as to be in his readiness, and from there Donia and I can travel quite comfortably 3rd class. So that I may very likely be able to send you not only 25, but 30 rubles. But enough. I've covered 2 sheets already, and there's no space left for more. Our whole history, but so many events have happened. And now, my precious Roja, I embrace you, and send you a mother's blessing till we meet. Love Donya, your sister Roja. Love her as she loves you, and understand that she loves you beyond anything, more than herself. She is an angel in you, Roja. You are everything to us, our one hope, our one consolation. If only you are happy, we shall be happy. Do you still say your prayers, Roja, and believe in the mercy of our Creator and the Redeemer? I am afraid in my heart that you may have been visited by the new spirit of infidelity that is abroad today. If it is so, I pray for you. Remember, dear boy, how in your childhood when your father was living, you used to lisp your prayers at my knee, and how happy we were in those days. Goodbye, till we meet then. I embrace you warmly, warmly, with many kisses. Yours till death, Polchera Raskolnikov. It's the end of the letter. So we know Raskolnikov's first name is Roja Raskolnikov. Almost from the first, while he read the letter, Raskolnikov's face was wet with tears. But when he finished it, his face was pale and distorted and bitter. Wrathful and malignant smile was on his lips. He laid his head down in his threadbare dirty pillow and pondered a long time. His heart was beating violently and his brain was in turmoil. At last he felt cramped and stifled in the little yellow room that was like a cupboard or a box. His eyes and his mind craved for space. He took up his hat and went out, this time without dread of meeting anyone. He had forgotten his dread. He turned in the direction of Vasilevsky Ostrov, walking along Vasilevsky Prospect as though hastening on some business, but he walked, as his habit was, without noticing his way, muttering and even speaking aloud to himself, to the astonishment of the passers-by. Many of them took him to be drunk. That's interesting. So he got this like basically super good letter. How they're going to be rich and like he's gonna be fine and he's gonna get a job, but he's like super angry about it for some reason. Maybe just because like now his sister's married to this guy and he like didn't know about it. He might be. I think that's what it might be. He might be mad about that. See, oh, but we're in chapter 4. Let's go. His mother's letter had been a torture to him, but as regards the chief fact in it, he had not felt one moment's hesitation, even whilst he was reading the letter. The essential question was settled, and irrevocably settled in his mind. Never such a marriage while I am alive and Mr. Lucen being damned. The thing is perfectly clear, he muttered to himself with a malignant smile, anticipating the triumphs of his decision. No, mother, no, Donya, you won't deceive me. And when they apologize for not asking my advice and for taking the decision without me, I dare say they imagine it is arranged now and can't be broken off. But we will see whether it can be or not. A magnificent excuse. Peter Petrovich is such a busy man that even his wedding has to be in post haste, almost by express. No, Donya, I see it all, and I know what you want to say to me, and I know too what you were thinking about when you walked up and down all night, and what your prayers were like before the Holy Mother of Kazan who stands in Mother's bedroom. Bitter is the ascent to Golokha. So it is finally settled.
You have determined to marry a sensible businessman, Avdotya Romanova, one who has a fortune, has already made his fortune. That is so much more solid and impressive. A man who holds 2 government posts and who shares the ideas of our most rising generation, as Mother writes, and who seems to be kind, as Donia herself observes. That seems beats everything, and that very Donia, for that very seems, is marrying him. Splendid, splendid. But I should like to know why Mother has written to me about our most rising generation, simply as a descriptive touch, or with the idea of prepossessing me in a favor of Mr. Luchin. Oh, the cunning of them. I should like to know one thing more. How far they were open with one another that day and night and all this time since? Was it all put into words, or did both understand that they had the same thing at heart and in their minds, so that there was no need to speak of it aloud, and better not to speak of it? Most likely it was partly like that. From Mother's letter it's evident. He struck her as a rude a little, and Mother in her simplicity took her observations to Donia. And she was sure to be vexed and answered her angrily, I should think so. Who would not be angered when it was quite clear without any naive questions, when it was understood that it was useless to discuss it? And why does she write to me, love Donia, Roja, and she loves you more than herself? Has she a secret conscience prick at sacrificing daughter to her son? You are our one comfort, you are everything to us. Oh, Mother! His bitterness grew more and more intense, as if he had happened to meet Mr. Luchin at the moment he might have murdered him. Yes, that's true, he continued, pursuing the whirling ideas that chased each other in his brain. It is true that, in these times and care to get to know a man, but there's no mistake about Mr. Luchin. The chief thing is that he is a man of business and seems kind. That was something, wasn't it, to send the bags and big box for them? A kind man, no doubt, after that. But his bride and her mother are to drive in a peasant's cart covered with sacking. I know, I have driven in it. No matter. It is only 90 versts, and then they can travel very comfortably third class for 1,000 versts. Quite right, too. One must cut one's coat according to one's cloth. But what about you, Mr. Luchin? She is your bride. And you must be aware that her mother has to raise money on her pension for the journey. To be sure, it's a matter of business, a partnership of mutual benefit with equal shares in expenses, food and drink provided, but pay for your tobacco. The businessman has got better of them too. The luggage will cost less than their fares and very likely go for nothing. How is it that they don't see all that, or is it that they don't want to see? And they are pleased, and to think that this is only the first blossoming, and that the real fruits are to come. But what really matters is not the stinginess, it is not the meanness, but the tone of the whole thing. For that will be the tone after the marriage, it's a foretaste of it. And Mother too, why should she be so lavish? What will she have by the time she gets to Petersburg? 3 several roubles or 2 paper ones, and she says, that old woman, what does she expect to live upon in Petersburg afterwards? She has her expect to live she has her reasons already for guessing that she could not live with Donia after the marriage, even after for the first few months. The good man has no doubt let slip something on that subject also. The mother would deny it. I shall refuse, says she. On whom is she reckoning then? Is she counting on what is left of her 120 roubles of pension? When Afanasy Ivanovitch's debt is paid, she knits woolen shawls and embroiders cuffs, ruining her old eyes. And all her shawls don't add more than 20 rubles a year to her 120, I know that. So she's building all her hopes all the time on Mr. Luchin's generosity. He will offer it of himself, he will press it on me. You may wait a long time for that. That's how it always is with chivalresque noble hearts. To the last moment, every goose is a swan with them. Till the last moment, they hope for the best and will see nothing wrong. And although they have an inkling of the other side of the picture, yet they won't face the truth they are forced to. The very thought of it makes them shiver. They thrust their truth away with both hands until the man they deck in false colors puts on a fool's cap on them with their own hands. I should like to know whether Mr. Luchin has any orders of merit. I bet he has Anna in his buttonhole and that he puts it on when he goes in time with contractors and merchants. He will for sure have it for his wedding too. Enough of him. Confound him. Well, mother I don't wonder at. It's like her. God bless her. But how could Donia, darling, as though I did not know you. You were nearly 20 when I saw you last. I understood you then. Mother writes that Donia can put up with a great deal. I know that very well. I knew that 2.5 years ago, and for the last 2.5 years I have been thinking about it, thinking of just that. Donia can. Flip the page. Flip the page, please. Huh? Can it work? Oh, it's just super slow. It is kind of like expected though, like knowing his character so far, there was no way he was going to like take this reasonably. Like he seems like kind of really crazy. So even though the letter was like super nice and hopeful, he's just losing his mind, finding things to be pissed off about. Basically, he's saying that like he thinks that the um guy is like tricking them and he should be paying for more, um and that they're like hopelessly delusional about what a great man and opportunity this is. Okay, so he's saying Donia can put up with a great deal. If she could put up with Mr. Svid and all the rest of it, she certainly can put up with a great deal. And now mother and she have taken it into their heads that she can put up Mr. Lucin, who propounds a theory of the superiority of wives raised from destitution and owing everything to their husband's bounty, who propounds it too, almost at the first interview. Granted that he let it slip, though he's a sensible man. Yet maybe it was not a slip at all, but he meant to make himself clear as soon as possible. But Donia, she understands the man, of course, but she will have to live with the man. Why? She'd live on black and bread and water. She would not sell her soul. She would not barter her moral freedom for comfort. She would not barter it for all Schleswig Holstein, much less Mr. Luzin money. No, Donia was not that sort when I knew her, and she is still the same, of course. Yet there's no denying the Smid, the Svid, the Svids are a bitter pill. It's a bitter thing to spend one's life a governess in the provinces of 200 rubles, but I know she wouldn't. She would rather be a oh, she would rather be an N-word on a plantation or let with a German master than degrade her soul and her moral dignity by binding herself forever to a man whom she does not respect and with whom she has nothing in common, for her own advantage. And if Mr. Luchin has been unalloyed gold or one huge diamond, she would never have consented to become his legal concubine. Why is she consenting then? What's the point of it? What's the answer? It's clear enough. For herself, for her comfort, to save her life, she would not sell herself, but for someone else she is doing it. For one she loves, for one she adores, she will sell herself. And that's what it all amounts to. For her brother, for her mother, she will sell herself. She will sell everything. In such cases, we overcome our moral feeling if necessary. Freedom, peace, and conscience even all are brought into the market. Let my life go, if only my dear ones may be happy. More than that, we become casuists. We learn to be Jesuitical, and for a time maybe we can soothe ourselves and we can persuade ourselves that it is one's duty for a good object. That's just like us. It's as clear as daylight. It's clear that Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov is the central figure in the business and no one else. Oh yes, she can endure his happiness, keep him in the university, make him a partner in the office, make his whole future secure. Perhaps he may even be a rich man later on, prosperous, respected, and may even end his life a famous man. But my mother? It's all Rodya, Princess Rodya, her firstborn. For such a son who would not sacrifice such a daughter. Oh, loving, over-partial hearts, why for this sake we would not shrink even from Sonia's fate? Sonia, Sonia Marmeladov, the eternal victim so long as the world lasts. Have you taken the measure of your sacrifice, both of you? Is it right? Can you bear it? Is it any use? Is there any sense in it? And let me tell you, Donia, Sonia's life is no worse than life with Mr. Luchin. There can be no question of love, Mother writes. And what if there is no respect either? If on the contrary there is no aversion, contempt, or repulsion, what then? So, you will have to keep up your appearance too. Is that not so? Do you understand what that smartness means? Do you understand that the Luchin smartness is just the same thing as Sonia's and maybe worse, viler, baser, because in your case, Donia, it's a bargain for luxuries after all. But with Sonia, it's simply a question of starvation. It has to be paid for. It has to be paid for, Donia, this smartness. And what if it's more than you can bear afterwards if you regret it? The bitterness, the misery, the curses, the tears hidden from all the word, for you are not Maria Petrovna. And how will your mother feel then? Even now she is uneasy, she is worried, but then when she sees it all clearly, and I... Yes, indeed, what have you taken me for? I won't have your sacrifice, Donia, I won't have it, mother. I shall not be, so long as I am alive, it shall not. I won't accept it. He suddenly paused in his reflections and stood still. It shall not be? But what are you going to prevent it? You'll forbid it? And what right have you? What can you promise then on your side to give you such a right? Your whole life, your whole future you will devote to them when you have finished your studies and obtained a post? Yes, we have heard all that before. And that's all words, but now something must be done. Do you understand that? And what are you doing now? You are living upon them. They borrow on their 100 rubles pension. They borrow from the Svids. How are you going to save them from Svids, from Afanasy Ivanovich Varsich, of future millionaire Zeus, who would arrange their lives for them? In another 10 years? In another 10 years, mother will be blind with the knitting shawls, maybe will weeping too. She will be worn to a shadow with fasting. And my sister? just check when the next chapter is.
I think, and soon. Okay, I'm gonna end it this page.
Woman, when we have become of your sisters in 10 years, what may happen to her during those 10 years? Can you fancy?
So it's like he wants to do something, but like he can't do anything because like he's poor and useless. Um, so he tortured himself, fretting himself with such questions and finding a kind of enjoyment in it. And yet all these questions were not new ones suddenly confronting him. They were old familiar aches. It has long since they had first begun to grip and rend his heart. Long, long ago his present anguish had its first beginnings. It has waxed and gathered strength. It had matured and concentrated until it had taken the form of a fearful, frenzied, and fantastic question, which tortured his heart and his mind, clamoring insistently for an answer. Now his mother's letter had burst on him like a thunderclap. It was clear that he must not now suffer passively, worrying himself over unsolved questions, but that he must do something, do it at once, and do it quickly. Anyway, he must decide on something or else. And that's where I'll end it tonight, where we can assume he's going to make a super dumb decision next. Because he's freaking it right now, and knowing him, he already has like a million bad ideas. Let's see. We ended on, was it chapter 4? Chapter 4 on page 2. We're at a good amount. At least 20 pages. 20 pages in 1.5 hours. I like that. The letter part was a little like, it was difficult. Like it just kept going on and on. But like when he has these super monologues, like he just goes crazy, like it gets super heated. And that's always exciting because it's just like you're like literally seeing someone freak it. That's what it feels like. I bet like when they all show up, and especially when the guy shows up, like he's gonna flip and do some crazy crap. Like, well, this book is called Crime and Punishment. So I feel like that would probably give some sense of what's probably gonna happen once this guy shows up face to face. Because I mean, I was kind of convinced by the letter that the mom wrote. Like it seemed nice, but he really took it like as just like a complete trick. Which I mean, I guess is kind of valid. I mean, you should be like careful. If someone was like sent me a letter, it's like I got married in one day just for the money. Is I would literally break that up like immediately. So it's true, but I mean, we're just thinking about in the context. Like his whole family's so broke. He's literally so broke. Everyone's so broke. So I feel like in those conditions, I feel like you gotta just get the money. I feel like it's fair to start gold digging. I feel like it's fair. But he's gonna, I mean, we've already established he's crazy and he's gonna do something crazy. He's gonna do crime and get punished. Name drop. Name drop the book. Okay. Um. Yeah, this was gonna be a short stream, but I wanted to read a little bedtime reading. And it is bedtime because it's midnight. But thank you for listening. This will also be uploaded. I'm gonna upload my reading stuff, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. With the new schedule, and I think we're gonna play something. I'm gonna be playing something. Probably one of the little games. Yeah, good night, Drazi. I hope you